After the end of the third day of the third test match between India and Australia, it seems to be that Pat Cummins is emerging as the decisive factor between these two very well balanced, high quality cricket teams. Thank you for watching my videos. I appreciate it, and I hope to hear your comments and your feedbacks. Please like and subscribe as well. Um, this video will devote to why it is that Pat Cummins has started to become the defining factor of this series. But rather than focusing on Cummins per se, what I will do is focus on one of his nemesis or one of his victims in this series, which is Cheteshwar Pujara, who many argue was the decisive factor the last time these two teams met each other 2 years ago. Because as you recall, Pujara was a wall that would just be unmoving. He soaked so many deliveries, and he made sure that the Australian bowlers got very exhausted bowling overs after overs after overs. I personally believe Australia's brittle batting was the decisive fact in the last series, but the two arguments go well together because while the batting was not spending enough time at the crease to let the bowlers relax and to recover, it was Pujara who made it very difficult for the bowlers to be fresh while they were on the field as well. So the bowlers got more and more frustrated by the batters' inability to spend enough time at the crease because the bowlers themselves were spending so much time on the crease as a result of Pujara's indefatigable defense. So this is a weird thing for me, an amateur cricketer, to be critiquing a player of the pedigree of Cheteshwar Pujara and his batting. But rather than being critical of him just for the intent of being critical, what I hope to do is think about Pujara in relationship to Steve Smith. And the argument I want to make is that perhaps there is some benefits to this kind of revolutionary uh, shift Smith has made in his batting. Just to summarize what I argued in my previous video about Smith's revolutionary batting, I argued that while orthodox batting is one where the front foot presses forward to get in line with the ball, what Steve Smith does differently is that he moves his back foot further go towards the right to cover the off stump and the middle stump. And then the front foot come alongs and covers the line of the ball as well when he's trying to hit the straight drive. So when you look at Steve Smith's straight drives, what you will find is that instead of moving his front foot before the back foot, he actually covers the off stump and the middle stump with his back foot, and he covers the entire stumps as a result of it. His head stays balanced, which allows him to to have the confidence in himself that he won't miss the ball hitting his pads, and he's able to drive the ball down the ground. What that basically allows him to do is, while it puts him at a risk of getting out on the on side of the field by maybe clipping the ball to square leg or to gully region or to silly mid wicket or to get LBW'd or to lose his leg stump as he did against Bumrah in the last test match, and also to nick it to the keeper as well. That's another thing he can do. And the leg slip as well, as he had done against Ashwin a couple of times. While he takes that risk, it also really makes it very difficult for the bowlers to attack him on the onside of his game, right? Sorry, the offside of the game, the part of the game which is to the right of the right-hander batsman, right? In other words, it becomes harder for the bowlers to attack the outside of his edge. The only example of a successful one in this particular series was the first time Ashwin got him, and Ashwin got him by changing the pace of the ball. And while Smith expected the ball to turn in a little, it went straight. Apart from the example like that, Smith rarely you will see is hitting the ball to gully or to the keeper or to the first slip. The reason he's able to do that is because when he moves his back foot horizontally further and covers the off and middle stump, he gets into a position where he knows his head is positioned right beneath the off stump line. Anything outside of that line, he can leave that ball, or if he wants to play that ball, he's well aware where his head is in relationship to the ball, right? So he can go back and play a punch through the cover. He can cut the ball between gully and point, or between point and cover, or he can hit a straight drive, on drive, if the ball is pitching somewhere between off and middle stump, but a full pitch ball, or he can hook or pull the ball if it's short, if it's pitched much shorter than that, right? Uh, it allows him to attack everything on the offside of his game, which is usually the channel where fast bowlers try to attack the batters. The best example of that is Pujara's rivalry against Pat Cummins. in this particular series, Pat Cummins is dominating that rivalry. And one could argue that after seeing these two teams play each other for the third time in this series and the third day's conclusion, that rivalry may be the defining factor in this series altogether. You can have all kinds of other factors that you can account for, like Virat Kohli's departure for paternity leave. You can talk about the injuries to Shami and Ishant Sharma. You can talk about the quarantine on Rohit Sharma, or you can talk about India's lack of consensus on who should be the keeper for their team as another factor. And you can talk about Hanuma Vihari's batting, whether he should be in the team or not. All kinds of examples. There are other characters involved too, but oftentimes that's the beauty of Test cricket. You really don't know what exactly is that matchup which is making one team lose and the other team win, especially when both teams are equally balanced, when one team has won the first test match by 8 wickets, the other team the second test match by 8 wickets. It leaves the viewer even more far away from figuring out who is ahead of the other team. After day 3, one could argue that it seems like Australia, if indeed they are ahead in this test match and in this series more broadly, it's because of Cummins versus Pujara's rivalry. For some of you who may have been watching the series closely, but perhaps not as closely as others, or who had been watching the series closely but just didn't know what's happening in this rivalry, as you can see, this stat just reveals how dominant Cummins has been against Pujara. Pujara has faced 129 balls. Out of those, 119 have been dot balls. So he scored 19 runs off 10 other balls, which is probably some couple of boundaries, couple of twos, I bet. But he has basically blocked a lot more than 90% of the balls that Cummins has bowled to him. So that tells you two things. One, Pujara has a good defense and he plays defensively. But the second thing is Cummins has a relentless line and length. Another thing it tells you is that Cummins has only bowled 129 balls. I wonder how many balls Cummins had bowled to him in the previous series by the third day of the third test match. Perhaps a few more, because that was one of Pujara's great strength in the last test match. He made these Australians, these big, lanky Australian fast bowlers, these great athletes, spent a lot of time with the physiotherapist and the massage and the masseuse while the batters were bowling, because he just had them bowl so many times to him. But in those innings, Pujara had a rhythm to his batting. No matter how slowly he started, he would start to cut the ball. He would start to noodle the ball a little more. In this series, he hasn't been able to do so. Ponting has been quite critical of his lack of armory in his batting. Ponting argues that he doesn't have a horizontal shot. He's not hooking, pulling, or cutting the ball. Those are some of the attack shots in Test cricket, because you have a lot of gap between gully and point. Anything between gully and point usually goes for a 4, because in Test cricket you rarely see a not fine leg. Uh, uh, Forgetting that position in anyways, I'm forgetting the name of that position, but basically when you're standing at the boundary but you're angled around the slip cordon, it's completely blanking off on what that position stands for or is called. So that's one thing. Pujara has not been able to play any attacking strokes. Another thing is really the way in which Pujara has been getting out to Cummins. A lot of these dismissals, if not all 4 of them, I would argue are dismissals that have been so eerily similar to the way in which he got out this last test match. So let's just actually see how he got out. Sorry, not the last test match. I meant on this last day of play at Sydney, the third day. All of these deliveries, Pujara seems a little rushed, a little hurried. They all of them kind of have a bounce element to it, where Pujara gets a little taken aback by how far up it came to him. All of them are outside edges to Tim Paine. You can see such dismissals definitely in the second innings of Adelaide. Must have definitely the first innings as well, I think, of Adelaide Test match, and one more, I bet. He got out just the same way. So out of 5 times, or well, actually maybe 4 times, he's just the 4 times he's gotten out and he's batted, they've all been in that particular fashion. What can we learn from Steve Smith to make an argument that perhaps there are certain benefits to his revolution in the way you can defend the ball, right? in order to do so, let's actually just watch the video again to see exactly what makes Pujara such an orthodox batsman, right? What makes him not Steve Smith? As you can see, standing with taking a guard that is probably a middle stump guard or definitely a hybrid middle and leg guard, closer to the middle than the leg. There's some space between the back and the front leg, and they're aligned such that he's got a slight bit of an open chested, although he's quite squared on nevertheless, but he's got a little bit of, he doesn't have both of his feet parallel to each other. The front foot is slightly further to the left of the side, so it allows him to watch the ball. So in that case, he's more or less the way Steve bats, other than Steve takes a leg stump guard and Pujara is taking a middle stump guard. But this is where the difference between the two completely are not anymore. The similarities end at this particular moment, right? From here onwards, Pujara looks like a very orthodox kind of a batsman. He taps the bat quite a few times. That makes him slightly different than most modern day batsmen who like to keep their bat up. And he keeps tapping it, which is fine. I guess it works for him, allows him to stay in rhythm, gives him a certain beat, a certain energy to his body. So there must be a reason he does those things. But this is the difference, right? This is where the two of them are completely different. Had this been Steve Smith facing Pat Cummins at IPL or in the Nets, etc., what you would see, or in BBL, what you would have seen by this point, while the ball is about to pitch, the ball is about to land on the pitch, his leg stump would have already been somewhere around here, between the off and middle stump, maybe even somewhere, I would say, around here, just slightly even ahead of the off stump. His head would have definitely been aligned with the off stump, so his head looks fine, Pujara's here. Although one could say slightly tilted, but I wouldn't be too critical of that. His bat is facing for slip. He looks like in good position, right? But the difference here is Pujara has got the front foot pressed forward, the back foot is leaned a little bit, the knees are bent, and what allows it to happen, the reason why one could argue from a Steve Smith point of philosophy of batting, is that what you can see here is that this channel, the off stump and the few inches outside of off stump, become a channel where the bowler can attack the batsman, right? If Pat Cummins keeps bowling in this channel while varying his length, some a little forward, some a little full length, this one slightly shorter, right? It allows you to consistently challenge the batsman's outside edge. And we can see that happen in this example where Pat Cummins bowls a slightly shorter ball and it catches his outside edge. Because the ball pitches, it straightens up, it carries a little bounce. Pujara's back leg has gone off the ground. He tried to keep it play low. He hoped the ball would take some part of the outside edge and not carry to the slips because of how lightly he's holding the bat, which is a very good thing he does in general. But the reason it doesn't work is because the ball has enough bite in it, the ball has enough height in it, and it just catches a really good part of the bat and goes straight to the keeper, right? A lot of times Pujara, when he takes the ball, if it's going to the keeper, most likely he's in trouble because the ball will carry to the keeper. But oftentimes you will see Pujara, when he nicks the ball to slips, it doesn't make its way to the slip fielder. That's because he plays the ball with such light hands. He doesn't push to the ball. But it doesn't matter. Sometimes, as this series is demonstrating, this particular delivery has become Pujara's unbecoming. It has taken his wicket quite a few times, and it's been kind of like this, as if we're watching these dismissals on repeat. This is where one could argue that Steve Smith's revolution in batting, or what one could say, is that by taking the risk of making the onside game of his batting become where bowlers attack him, he has really created a burden for the bowlers, because the bowlers would rather bowl in this nice channel out on off stump, just outside off stump. And it's the most vicious thing to play when the ball is angling in, it pitches and then it straightens up. It's the hardest thing to play, because while it's angling in, you want to make sure your bat is right next to your pad, as Pujara makes sure here. Pujara is doing a good job of defending his wicket, and he's doing a good job of defending the ball period, right? His defense is very solid, but always the outside edge of the ball will be something that Pat Cummins can test on him, right? Every batsman eventually gets out. So the problem with Pujara is not that he's getting out. The problem is that by the time he does get out, he has not done enough damage to the Australian bowling attack. And the Australian bowlers, even though they've been bowling 88 overs, they just are getting his wicket at the right time. They're not getting this wicket at the 118th over, in which case India might have scored enough to perhaps get a 30-40 runs lead, right? So Pujara is playing the same role he played last time, but it's not working this time around. He's just getting out at 50s and at 40s. He's actually averaging somewhere around early 20s. So he's not had the greatest series, even though he has soaked a lot of balls. But this time around, he's soaking balls, but he's not soaking any pressure and deflecting pressure back onto the Australians. And I think Pat Cummins deserves all the credit for the way he's bowling. But this video, I wanted to make an argument as to why Steve Smith's genius allows him to problem solve and to nullify bowlers' ability to attack in this particular channel, the way in which they are attacking Pujara, who happens to have a fantastic defense as well. So I hope this video was useful. Please share and please do subscribe to this channel. Thank you.